Good evening and welcome back to our weekly question and answer series for Anash.org. Follow-up question from last week. Normally I don't need to judge the need of people who ask for money, because I leave that to the organization managing the tzedukah. But if a relative were to approach me, how do I determine the level of assistance? Do we say any available funds go to them as they are relatives, or only until their basic needs are met? When it comes to your tzedukah which you give, which you have a right to give for your relative, because you have a toivus hanua, as the poskim say, you have a toivus hanua to be machlat for whom you have to give and whom you want to give, as I mentioned last week. So you could decide, if you feel that they're in the need, you don't have to make investigation. If you see their lifestyle and you see they're in need, you could give them assistance. And how much to give is also up to you. You could give them till they have the basic need. You could give them more, that means they should have lift comfortable. And you can also give them less than they need. You don't have to give them fully whatever they need. As I mentioned last week, giving a person whatever he needs, that's the achrayas on the organization, on the tzedukah organization. But a person could give how much he wants, to whom he wants, as much as he wants. Because that's his toivus hanua which he has from his muas maser. Question. General rule about maser. I was told once that if you request tuition deductions and scholarship, and in general you have a hard time paying for everyday expenses, you do not need to give maser. Is this true? Now, regarding giving maser, there's a machloikas of poiskim. What's the chiyuv? Some poiskim say it's a chiyuv midoiraisa, and they have a sifri, which in the sifri says that from where do we know that you have to give maser not only from your produce, only from other things too. So they have a posik which says that you should, so you see you have to give from everything. And this is what the shit of the Shar Ephraim, the Pesach Chiva brings us down, as Simon Shilam at Aleph Sifkud It Bais, that it's a chiyuv deraisa. Other poskim say it's not a chiyuv deraisa, it's a chiyuv midrabonon. That's the Chiva Mayahava in the Chaylik Aleph Simon Paizayin. Also his pashtus, if the Terzuov looks like he holds like that in Sifkut Lamad Bais, that it's not a deraisa, but it's a mitzvah derabonon. But then we have a third shita which says it's not even a mitzvah derabonon, it is a minik toiv. And this is what we see already in the Tshuvas of Maram Rottenberg, one of the Rishonim, Simon Ein Dalat, which says it's only a minik toiv. This is how the Bach writes, that it's only a minik toiv. Now, most of the poskim say it's not a deraisa. And some poskim paskin that it's not even a derabonon either. It is only a minik toiv like the Bach. There is just interesting to know, there's a Chiva Rabbi Didier Tivail, the Sema Samach, which he says that in Eretz Yisrael it is a deraisa, and in Chislu it's only a derabonon. It's like Trumas Masras and Chala Akapunim, when there was a Beis Hamikdash, that over there was a deraisa, in Eretz Yisrael was a deraisa, and in Chislu is a derabonon. So he says also Masik Sufim. So when it comes to maser, most of the poskim say it's not a deraisa, it's only a derabonon, and some say it's only a minik toiv. Now, when it comes to deduct things from Maaser, we also have a machlokas. Most poskim say you could deduct all the expenses which you have for getting the money. That means all the expenses for your business or expenses which makes the money. That means even if you don't have a business, you work for someone, but a babysitter in order you should be able to go to work, a taxi to go to work, every expense which is a part of getting the money, you could deduct. That's according to all the poskim. But you cannot deduct your daily living expenses. The daily living expenses you cannot deduct from the cheshbon of Maaser. But there's a Knesset Agdoyle in Tur Sima Reish Memtes in Hilchas Tzedakah, which he says that the person has a right to deduct before he comes to give Maaser. He can deduct all his regular expenses which he needs, which is a necessity for his living. So he can deduct his rent, his utility bills, basic clothing, and he writes that's but only things which is necessity. You cannot buy fancy things, luxurious things. Even food you could deduct regular chaya yom food, but you cannot deduct moisterous, lavish food. This is the Knesset Agdoyle. Now most of the poskim do not agree with the Knesset Agdoyle, and they say you cannot deduct your personal expenses from Maaser. But the Shaivet Halevi Rav Osner says that if you have a young man, which is a koil young man or a poor person, which if he's going to go and not deduct his expenses, the daily expenses, basically, and he will have to give whatever he gets, his paycheck, he will have to give Maaser, he won't have money to make ends meet. So he will have to go around collecting money for himself. He will have to be asking other people for assistance. So therefore he says, such a young man which is poor and cannot make his ends meet, then he can deduct wherever his necessary expenses which he needs to give, and only if he has money more than his necessity, from that part of money he should give Maaser. This is what Rav Osner holds, and there is other poskim also which hold like this. So going back to your question, if a person is a poor person and he does not have money to pay tuition, and he does not have money for his daily expenses, and if he's going to give Maaser, he's going to have to rely on other people for their donations. Yes, you could rely on the Knesset Agdoyle, as Rav Osner writes, and you don't give Maaser only if you have extra money. And if you don't have extra money, then you don't need to give Maaser. But that's only a person which is stuck in a situation that if he's going to give Maaser, he's going to have to rely on other people. If it's not such a case, he should not deduct his daily expenses, and he should give Maaser. Just want to mention that you have to remember that Chazal tell us Asar b'shvil shitis ashar, that you give Maaser in order you should become rich, you should get it back. And the Rebbeinu Shalom says, as the Rebbe brings it down a couple of times, this is the only mitzvah which you have the right to test the Rebbeinu Shalom. So before a person stops giving Maaser, he should think good, if he's desperate, he should do it. But if he's not 100% desperate, you should remember that basically, whatever he gives a Maaser for tzedakah, Hashem eventually is going to give it back to him. Question. We are hosting an elegant event in a Chabad house, which we don't have access to a kosher mikveh. And I want to use new set of china dishes. Since we don't have a mikveh locally, can I use it once and toivel it eventually when I have the opportunity? And the answer is no. You cannot toivel it. You cannot use it even once before you toivel it. And the Halacha Shulchan Aruch is in Yedai Siman Kiv Chof Sif Ha in the Ago that you cannot use any utensils, any dishes till you toivel it if you buy it from a goy, even if you want to use it for temporarily. And even once. There are some people who mistakenly say that you could use it once. Only the second time you have to toivel it. And that's not correct. It is a mistake, and even once you cannot toivel it. You cannot use it if it's not getoivelt. So therefore, no, you cannot use these china dishes if it is not toivelt. Follow-up question. Do plastic pitchers in bowls need to be toivelt? Now the Torah writes in Parshas Matas, Ach es hazov, ves ha-kesav, ves ha-nechoshes, ves ha-barzel, ves ha-bedil, ves ha-oferes, which is all of them, which the Torah mentions is a kind of metal. So the Torah writes, Kol dover asher yuva ba'aish, wherever you used it with fire, you have to, in order to make it kosher, you have to put it through fire. That means you have to make libun, because you use it with fire. And then the Torah writes v'tuhar, and you should make it tuhar. So Chazal say that when you buy a used keli, a used utensils from a goy, there's two stages we have to do. First, you have to kasher it. That means you have to put it in hot, piping, boiling water, which is on the fire. If it is a thing which you don't use direct with water, direct with fire, only with water, which is usually dishes and utensils. But if it is a dish which you used direct with fire, for instance a frying pan, etc., you have to make libun. That's number one. Then the Torah says v'tuhar. There's another thing which you need to do. You have to make it tahar. Which this Chazal say, this means you have to bring it in mi-kedusha, non-kedusha to kedusha. From reshis choil to reshis kodesh. Like a ger. A non-Jew becomes a Jew, has to go in tefillah. The same is also a keli. Dishes which come from a non-Jew has to go through a tefillah b'mikveh. What kind of mikveh? The Torah writes, Ach b'may nidi yischatu, has to be a kosher mikveh, which is kosher also for women. And we have to make sure, by the way, that some people use mikveh, a man mikveh, to toivel kelim. He has to make sure that the man mikveh is kosher also for kelim, because not every mikveh which is good for men are good for women and kelim. So we see the Torah says that we have to toivel a kela which is from metal. The Torah gives us 6 names, which is Zohar, Kesef, Nechoshes, Barzel, and all of them are metal, which is also included aluminum, nerasta, all of them are b'chal, is included of metal, and it is mechiyef to toivel it mid the oiraisa. Then Chazal say that if you have glass, dishes which is glass, you also have to toivel, but that's only mid rabbonon. Menatori you don't need, only when it's metal. But the Chazal say that you should also toivel kelim, which is glass. Why? Because it has some kind of similarity to metal. Since metal, if a pot which is metal gets a hole or cracks or breaks, you could weld it together. You could make it, fix it. You put it into in boiling in fire, and you can make it. You repair it. And since kliz chichis, glass dishes, you could also, if it breaks, hypothetically, you could put it back into the fire and make it back for a keli. So since it has some kind of similarity to metal, midrabanan, you have to toivel it. So this is midaraisa, you have to make metal dishes, and midrabanan glass, which glass means also crystal, etc. Now, when it comes to plastic, do you need to toivel it or not? The question starts. There is an oil Avrum from Rav Avrum Shag, one of the Achroinim from about 150 years ago, and he writes in Simach of Dalet regarding Kli Eitzim, dishes which is made from atzumas, from animals, from bones of animals. Now, Minatoiri, you don't have to toivel it. But he says, Midraboni, you have to toivel it. Since Kli Eitzim, you could melt the same as you could do with glass and metal. You could melt it and make it back in ukeili. So therefore, has the same halacha as glass. And since glass is midraboni, you have to toivel, the same will go also to dishes which is from atzumas. So the achroinim say, some achroinim say, the same will go to plastic. Since plastic, you could
also take and melt it if it has a hole or it breaks. So the same will go also to plastic, and you have to toivel it the same as klei zechiches midrabanan. And this is how some poskim say. Rebbe Zalman Shimon writes it. Rebbe Zalman Shimon Dvorkin in his Kovetz Rezash, and the Mechazitzchik writes like that in Chaylik Gimel Siman Einwurf. In other poskim say that you should toivel it because it goes into the same category as klei zechiches. But there's a lot of other poskim which say that we cannot make new hisufos in the gezeiras of Chazal. Wherever Chazal were goizer, we have to do. Whatever Chazal did not say that you have to toivel, we cannot add on stuff which Chazal didn't say. So since in the time of the Chazal, they didn't have plastic, so therefore, we don't need to toivel it at all. And this is how the Pupuruv Zetzal, the Balvachi Yosef writes, the Shaivet Alayvi holds like that, the Moshe Feinstein holds like that, and Yabia Oyma, Tzitzel Yezer, Cherkes Yankov, a lot of poskim say that plastic does not need to be toiveled at all. So if a person wants to be machmer and toivel a keili of plastic like Rebbe Zalman Shimon and the Mechazitzchak, he could toivel it, but he cannot make a bracha. And if a person is in a situation that it's very hard for him to toivel, he doesn't want to toivel it, he does not need to toivel it at all, and he can rely on all the Gdoila poskim which say that plastic does not need to be toiveled. Question: what about aluminum disposable pans? I heard that you could use it once before toiveling. Is that so? Now, aluminum foil pans, which is made, you should use once and throw it away. A lot of poskim say it is not considered a kli. It doesn't have a cheshivas of a kli, and since it is only temporarily used, it's not for a long term, it's tashmish arai, therefore you don't need to toivel it at all, even if you cook in it or you bake in it. And this is how the Chalkes Yankov writes in Yeridai Simem Vov, and the Igris Moshe, and some other poskim say that this is the minik, that aluminum disposable pans, you don't need to toivel. In the Mechazitzchik writes, V'chayin amadaba, that means this is how the minig oilim is, that you don't toivel it. So, aluminum foil disposable pans does not need to be toiveled before using. Now, if a person wants to use it more than that, most poskim, which I mentioned before, says you don't need to toivel it even then, but since it's not made to use for a long term, so even if a person wants to use it 2, 3, 4 times, it's still not considered a choshev keila, and you don't need to toivel it. Some poskim say if you want to use it the second time, more than once, you should toivel it. And of course, you should toivel it without a bracha, since whenever you have a suffix, some poskim say it does not need to have tefillah. You cannot toivel it with a bracha. But by the way, you could know that today's day you could get disposable aluminum pans in all sizes which has a hechsher. So they don't need tefillah. So you should ask your local store for it, and if it doesn't have it, you should bring it in. Question. I bought a new cast iron pot. Do I need to kasher the cast iron pot before I am going to toivel it, or I could just toivel it and I could use it like this? Metal pots, there are some which say that you should, before you use it, before you toivel it, you should kasher it, because they when they finish the keli, they use a oil which could come from animal fat, and it might be non-kosher animal fat. So therefore, whenever you buy a new pot, you should kasher it before you toivel it. You should dip it in another pot with hot water. This is some poskim say. But a lot of other poskim say that you don't need to do it. The Tzitz Eliezer, Heilig Bais, Simanin High, says you don't need to do it, because even if they use non-kosher animal oil, it is pogum. When they use it, it is already pogum. It's not edible. So since when it comes, it gets nivla in the pot, it is already not edible. So therefore, it's not a problem, and you don't need to kasher it. The Mishnah Luchas, the Menashe Klein, in Heilig Zayin, Siman Kifid Bais, brings also this svara, and he adds on another svara, because once they finish it final, they put it into a very hot oven, and automatically it is burned out all the oil. So basically, even if they used it, and even it's not pugam, which he says, he agrees that it is pugam, but even if it wasn't pugam, it gets burned out, and you don't need to kasher it. And I will add on another reason why you don't have to kasher it, because most of the oils, even if they do oil, they will use today's day synthetic oil or vegetable oil. They won't use oil from an animal because it's much more expensive. But in any case, if a person wants to be a machmar, so Reb Shlomo Zalman Oibach writes in the Hilchos Shlomo on Hilchos Pesach that even if a person wants to be a machmar, he doesn't need to kasher it regularly to find a big pot and dip in this pot in that pot. He could put in water in this pot, even if it doesn't fill it up till the top. He could fill in a little bit water, a cup, 2 or 3 cups of water, boil it up. Automatically, it's on the fire. The whole pot will become Yatz Holder's boy. And since it's only a chimre, this is also considered kashering, since it gets really hot, it gets over 100 degrees, it is considered, in this situation, it's considered to be gekasher, and it's enough. So to answer your question, a lot of persons say you don't need to do anything, and if a person wants to be a machmar and kasher such a pot, then he should put in water, or he could put in water and boil it, and it will overrun, and that's a kasher 100%. Or even he doesn't want to go all the way, he puts in a couple of cups of water and he boils it till the pot gets very hot, and that's good enough. It's considered kashering, and then afterwards he should toivel it in a mikveh and he could use it. Okay, thank you for joining us, and please join us again next week and send in your question to inbox@Anash.org. Good night, good Yom Tov, it's a Chag Hagula from the Mittler Rebbe, and have a wonderful week.